Chevy Chase, born October 8, 1943 in Lower Manhattan, New York City, New York, United States, is an American comedy icon, known for his wit, natural acting style, and groundbreaking contributions to the entertainment industry. Born Cornelius Crane Chase, he was known as Chevy, a nickname derived from a folk poem about an English king reflecting his family's aristocratic lineage. Raised in a culturally rich household by his mother Kathleen Parker, a pianist, and his father Edward Tinsley Chase, a book editor, Chevy developed an early love of the arts and humor. He attended Bard College, where he honed his musical and acting talents before becoming one of the brightest stars of the 1970s and 1980s. Chevy Chase's career began as a founding member of Saturday Night Live, SNL, in 1975, where he became known for his hosting of Weekend Update and his unique physical comedy style. He brought memorable characters such as Clark Griswold in the National Lampoon's Vacation series, along with roles in Caddyshack, Fletch, and Three Amigos. With more than 5 decades in the entertainment industry, Chevy has won 3 Emmys and a Grammy, becoming one of America's most beloved comedians. However, his life has not been all about the spotlight. Chevy has been married 3 times, to Suzanne Chase from 1973 to 1976, Jacqueline Carlin from 1976 to 1980, and Janie Chase from 1982 to the present. He is the father of 4 children: Sydney Kathleen, Kaylee Lee, Emily Rochelle, and Brian Perkins. At 81 years old in 2025, Chevy continues to appear in film and television projects, although recent years have been overshadowed by health issues and controversies over his on-set behavior. Chevy Chase's life is the story of a talented, conflicted man who sought to bring laughter to the world, even in the face of deep personal sadness. The greatest sadness in Chevy Chase's life was his feelings of isolation and disconnection from loved ones, especially during his struggles with alcohol and drug addiction in the 1980s, along with controversies about his on-set behavior that alienated many of his colleagues. As a major star of Saturday Night Live and hit sitcoms, Chevy was under constant pressure to maintain a cheerful image, but inside, he was dealing with an emotional void that could not be filled. His alcohol and drug addiction began to worsen after he left SNL in 1976, when the pressures of fame and public expectations led him to turn to stimulants to escape the stress. He once admitted that there were nights when he sat alone in his Los Angeles apartment, drinking and crying, feeling that he had lost himself in the spotlight. This isolation was further deepened when Chevy was criticized for his unprofessional behavior on set. He frequently clashed with co-stars such as Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd, and was accused of being arrogant while working on Caddyshack and Community. These controversies left Chevy feeling misunderstood, as if the world only saw him as a comedian rather than a human being with wounds and insecurities. He once shared in an interview that the most painful thing was the feeling that no one really understood him, even when he was standing in front of millions of people. This sadness reached a peak in 1986, when he was hospitalized for addiction treatment at the Betty Ford Center, an experience that left him in tears as he confronted the reality of how he had hurt his family, especially his children and wife Janie. Although he survived this difficult period, the feeling of loneliness and misunderstanding remained an emotional scar that Chevy carried with him for the rest of his life, shaping the way he viewed himself and the world around him. Chevy Chase's career is a story of talent, creativity, and constant ups and downs in the entertainment industry. Growing up in New York, Chevy developed an early love of comedy and music, playing drums in the Chameleon Church Band at Bard College. After graduating, he went to work at National Lampoon, a humor magazine, where he wrote and performed on radio shows. It was there that Chevy honed his satirical and physical comedy style, which led to an opportunity on Saturday Night Live in 1975. As one of the original cast members of SNL, Chevy quickly rose to stardom as the host of Weekend Update, where he famously opened with the line, "I'm Chevy Chase, and you're not." His natural acting style and ability to fall over comically made him a phenomenon. But he left the show after just a season and a half to pursue a film career, a decision that left him in tears, fearing he was giving up a golden opportunity. Chevy's film career took off in the late 1970s with 1978's Foul Play, a romantic comedy with Goldie Hawn that earned him a Golden Globe nomination. He then made his mark with 1980's Caddyshack, a golf comedy that became a classic, and his role as Clark Griswold in 1983's National Lampoon's Vacation, an iconic character in American comedy. Films like 1985's Fletch and 1986's Three Amigos further cemented his status, but not everything was smooth sailing. The 1990s saw many failures, with films like Nothing But Trouble and Cops and Robertsons being critically panned, causing Chevy to fall into a state of self-doubt. He cried in the studio after reading negative reviews, feeling like he was losing his shine. To cope, Chevy turned to television projects, such as the role of Pierce Hawthorne on Community from 2009 to 2012. But conflicts with creator Dan Harmon caused him to leave the show in frustration. Despite the difficulties, Chevy has continued to work hard to maintain his career. He returned with guest roles on Hot Tub Time Machine and Vacation in 2015. And as of 2025, at the age of 81, he is still doing small projects, such as voice acting and comedy appearances. Every time he steps on stage, Chevy brings both his joys and sorrows, transforming them into unforgettable performances. His career is a testament to perseverance, despite moments of public pressure and personal trials that brought him to tears. Chevy Chase's greatest career successes were his roles on Saturday Night Live and as Clark Griswold in the National Lampoon's Vacation series. When he joined SNL in 1975, Chevy became one of the first comedians to define the show's style, with Weekend Update becoming an iconic segment. He won 3 Emmys as an actor and writer, and his comedic style of falling became a standard for physical comedy. Chevy recalls the moment he took the stage on SNL for the first time, when the audience laughed at his fake fall, making him so emotional that he had to hide his tears behind the scenes. This success not only brought him national fame, but also paved the way for a brilliant film career. Another milestone was his role as Clark Griswold in 1983's National Lampoon's Vacation. The film, which chronicles the Griswold family's troubled vacation, became a cult classic, with Chevy's Clark becoming the quintessential American dad, both lovable and clumsy. The film was a commercial success, grossing over $60 million, and spawned several sequels, including European Vacation and Christmas Vacation. Chevy has said that playing Clark was a tribute to his father, who always tried to bring joy to his family. And when the film was well received, he cried tears of pride. This success cemented Chevy's status as one of the top comedians, with the ability to turn everyday situations into memorable comedic moments. Another success was his role in 1985's Fletch, where Chevy played an investigative journalist with a flair for disguise. The film received critical acclaim and became one of his most beloved roles. Chevy recalled the moment he wrapped the final scene when director Michael Ritchie hugged him and told him he had created an immortal character. These successes, along with a Grammy Award for his 1976 comedy album, cemented Chevy as a comedy legend, a man who turned laughter into art and left an indelible mark on popular culture. Despite his success, Chevy Chase was not immune to setbacks and challenges that tested his perseverance. One of the biggest failures came in the 1990s, when a series of his films, such as 1991's Nothing But Trouble and 1994's Cops and Robertsons, flopped both commercially and critically. The films were criticized for lacking creativity, and Chevy faced harsh reviews that labeled him a faded star. He recalls spending long nights in his office, reading negative press, and crying, feeling like he had lost touch with his audience. The setbacks made him doubt his talent, and he considered giving up acting to return to writing. Another challenge was conflicts on set, especially during his time on Community from 2009 to 2012. Chevy often disagreed with creator Dan Harmon, leading to public arguments and ultimately his departure from the show. He was accused of inappropriate language and unprofessional behavior, which left him feeling misunderstood. Chevy once shared that he cried in his car after a stressful day of filming, feeling disrespected despite his dedication. These controversies damaged his reputation, and he struggled to regain the trust of viewers and his co-stars. His drug and alcohol addiction in the 1980s was also a major challenge. The pressure of fame and the relentless expectations pushed Chevy into a spiral of substance abuse, which led to his hospitalization at the Betty Ford Center in 1986. The process of rehab was a painful one, as he faced his mistakes and the feeling that he had hurt his family. These setbacks and challenges, while harsh, helped Chevy grow, learn to control his emotions, and continue to dedicate himself to comedy, even though there were times when he felt like he was fighting alone. Chevy Chase has always had a desire to achieve not only laughter, but also to build a lasting comedy legacy. One of his biggest goals was to reshape American television comedy, and his role on Saturday Night Live is a testament to this effort. When he joined SNL in 1975, Chevy worked tirelessly to create comedic segments like Weekend Update, where he wrote and performed with limitless creativity. He spent hours in the writer's room, experimenting with jokes and refining his flipping style, to create a show that was distinct. When he won 3 Emmys, Chevy felt he had achieved part of his dream, and he was proud to see SNL become a platform for comedians like Eddie Murphy and Tina Fey. Another accomplishment Chevy has always pursued is creating memorable film characters, most notably Clark Griswold in National Lampoon's Vacation. He worked closely with director Harold Ramis to build a character that was both funny and relatable, reflecting the family values he held dear. Chevy recalls the long days on set, when he would reshoot scenes to get the perfect comedic effect, and the pride he felt when the film became a classic. He also made a mark in the investigative comedy genre with Fletch, where he did many of his own stunts and disguises, despite the health risks. The fact that the film was loved by audiences is an accomplishment that Chevy cherishes, because it shows that he can be more than just a physical comedian. Chevy also wants to inspire the younger generation through comedy. He regularly participates in workshops at universities, sharing his experiences in writing and performing. He also supports charities, such as donating to arts programs for disadvantaged children. These efforts, while not earning him accolades, are accomplishments that Chevy cherishes, because they allow him to give back to the community that nurtured his talent. These accomplishments, from defining comedy to inspiring others, are the result of Chevy's passion and dedication throughout his career. Chevy Chase's love and marriage journey has been an emotional one, interspersed with moments of overwhelming happiness and harsh challenges, reflecting the complex character of a man who was both humorous and vulnerable. Born into a rich cultural background in Lower Manhattan, Chevy grew up surrounded by love stories from his pianist mother and dreams of a stable family. However, his personal life was not always as smooth as his comedic on-screen roles. Chevy has been married 3 times, to Suzanne Chase from 1973 to 1976, Jacqueline Carlin from 1976 to 1980, and Janie Chase from 1982 to the present. Each relationship has taught him profound lessons, shaping him into a man who values love but also understands the price of mistakes. Chevy's first marriage to Suzanne Chase began when he was a young artist, struggling to find his place in the entertainment industry. Suzanne, an interior designer, provided stability for Chevy during his early years as he worked at National Lampoon. However, the pressures of work and Chevy's impulsive nature led to the breakup of the relationship. He recalled coming home drunk at night, arguing with Suzanne, and then crying alone, feeling unworthy of her love. His second marriage to Jacqueline Carlin also did not last long, when Chevy was at the height of his fame on Saturday Night Live. Jacqueline, an aspiring actress, could not cope with Chevy's busy schedule and bohemian lifestyle, leading to divorce in 1980. These breakups left Chevy depressed, often sitting alone in his New York apartment with a bottle of wine in his hand and wondering if he would ever find true happiness. His marriage to Janie Chase, which began in 1982, was the light of Chevy's life. Janie, a television producer with a strong yet warm personality, became his rock. They met at an event in Los Angeles, where Janie was drawn to Chevy's humor, despite knowing his personal struggles. The birth of their 4 children, Sydney Kathleen, Kaylee Lee, Emily Richelle, and Brian Perkins, brought Chevy immense joy. He remembered Sunday mornings when the family would gather in their Bedford, New York, home, playing games and laughing, feeling that he had found true meaning in life. However, alcoholism and drug addiction in the 1980s tested their love. Janie never gave up on Chevy, even though there were nights when he would come home in a bad mood, leaving her crying with worry. When Chevy was hospitalized at the Betty Ford Center in 1986, Janie was there for him, holding his hand through his toughest days. Their love, though tumultuous, was a testament to the power of forgiveness and patience, helping Chevy get through the darkest times and find himself again. Chevy Chase's family, including his wife Janie and their 4 children, Sydney, Kaylee, Emily, and Brian, have insight into the sadness he went through, especially the loneliness and misunderstanding he felt during his years of struggling with addiction and on-set arguments. Janie, who has been with Chevy for more than 4 decades, knows better than anyone the pain he endured. She recalls the days after Chevy left Saturday Night Live when he spiraled into a spiral of alcohol and drugs, coming home with a blank look in his eyes. Janie once shared that she found Chevy crying in the living room, holding a family photo and saying that he feared he wasn't a good father. It was heartbreaking to see her husband, a man who had always brought laughter to millions of viewers, struggling with his own inner demons. Janie tried to comfort Chevy, reminding him that his family loved him for who he was, not for his movie star image. Chevy's eldest daughter, Sydney, also noticed her father's sadness. Growing up in the spotlight, she often saw Chevy laughing and talking in public, but she knew that he would often sit alone in his room, listening to old jazz records and looking at family photos. Sydney recalled Chevy talking about career failures, like the critically panned films of the 1990s, and how he tried to mask his pain with jokes. She felt that her father used his sadness as motivation to keep going, but she also worried that he was putting too much pressure on himself. When Chevy was criticized for his behavior on the set of Community, Sydney was the one who called to cheer him up, saying she was proud of how he always got back up after every setback. The other children, Emily and Brian, also had their own perspectives on their father's sadness. Emily once shared that she saw Chevy crying while reading negative articles after the Dan Harmon scandal, and this made her realize, despite being a stand-up comedian who opened up to audiences, Chevy Chase kept deep secrets to himself, things he rarely shared, even with Janie or his children. One of the biggest secrets was a nagging sense of insecurity about whether he truly deserved his fame. Despite winning 3 Emmys and becoming a Saturday Night Live icon, Chevy was constantly haunted by the idea that his success might have been a fluke, that he was just a comedian who happened to be loved by audiences for his flipping style. There were nights when he would sit alone in his Bedford home, rereading old SNL articles and wondering if people really loved him for his talent or just for his comedic moments. This fear drove him to work tirelessly, from writing to acting, as a way to prove his worth. Another secret was the severe depression that Chevy suffered after leaving SNL and during the worsening of his addiction in the 1980s. Fame brought him fame, but also the pressure to maintain a perfect image. There were times when Chevy felt like he was losing control, drinking to forget his failures and the pressure from the public. He considered seeking help from a therapist, but fears that it would damage his image kept him quiet. Instead, he coped by writing new jokes, using comedy as an outlet to hide his negative emotions. The nights he spent in the studio writing scripts and crying were moments when he felt like he was fighting the world alone. Chevy also concealed a deep desire to be recognized as a versatile artist, not just a comedian. He tried his hand at film production and songwriting, but these projects were often not as well received as he had hoped. He kept his dream of directing an art film or composing a jazz album to himself, fearing that audiences would not accept him as anything other than Clark Griswold. These secrets, though not revealed, were the inner battles Chevy faced, making him a much more complex person than the cheerful image audiences saw on screen. As of 2025, Chevy Chase is still happily married to Janie Chase, whom he has been married to since 1982. At 81, Chevy and Janie live a simpler life in their home in Bedford, New York, where they enjoy quiet moments with family and friends. Janie, a television producer with a warm heart and a strong spirit, became Chevy's constant companion, helping him through his most difficult times, from his addiction in the 1980s to his struggles on the set of Community. They often took walks in their backyard, where Chevy would tell Janie funny stories from his SNL days, and she would respond with words of encouragement, reminding him that he was still a talented artist. Chevy and Janie's marriage was not without its challenges. During the 1980s, as Chevy struggled with addiction, Janie spent long nights waiting for him to return, worried that he might not make it. There were times when they argued about Chevy putting his career ahead of his family, and he would leave the house in a rage, only to return in tears and apologizing. Janie was always forgiving, holding Chevy's hand through his days at the Betty Ford Center and helping him rebuild his relationship with his children. Chevy recalls a special moment when Janie threw him a surprise birthday party in 1993 with all 4 of their children in attendance, which made him cry tears of joy. This marriage, with its love and patience, was a testament to the strength of the bond, as Chevy and Janie continued to walk together through their final years. Chevy Chase's legacy is one of creativity, perseverance, and the ability to make millions of viewers around the world laugh. With more than 5 decades in the entertainment industry, Chevy made his mark as a founding member of Saturday Night Live, defining American television comedy with his Weekend Update and unique flipping style. Films like National Lampoon's Vacation, Caddyshack, and Fletch became classics, with the character of Clark Griswold becoming an icon of the loving but awkward American dad. Chevy is considered a pioneer, inspiring comedians like Will Ferrell and Tina Fey, who have followed in his footsteps. Chevy's influence is also reflected in his contributions to the community. He regularly participates in charity events, donating to organizations that support disadvantaged children and medical research, especially after experiencing his own health issues. Chevy also hosted workshops at colleges, sharing his comedy expertise and encouraging students to pursue their passions. These efforts helped him become a role model not only in the arts but also in contributing to society. He recalls visiting a children's hospital where he told jokes to make patients laugh and feeling like he was doing something meaningful. Chevy's legacy also lies in his role as a father and husband. He raised 4 children, instilling in them a love of the arts and the value of perseverance. Sydney, who pursued a career in television, often cited her father as an inspiration, not only for his talent, but also for his never-give-up spirit. In America, Chevy is seen as a cultural icon, a man who has brought laughter to generations. His legacy is the story of a man who overcame all odds to make a lasting impact, both through comedy and through his kindness and dedication. Chevy Chase's journey through grief is a story of resilience, compassion, and the ability to find light in the darkest of times. His greatest grief, the feeling of being alone and misunderstood during his years of struggling with addiction and on-set arguments, left a deep emotional scar. There were nights when Chevy would sit alone in his Bedford home, listening to jazz and crying, remembering the days when he felt like the world had turned its back on him. Instead of letting this pain consume him, however, Chevy turned it into fuel to continue bringing laughter, not only to audiences, but to his family and himself. Chevy began his journey through grief by focusing on his family and his work. Janie and his children became his biggest sources of strength, with evening